Hello there. I wanted to make this video for a while, and that is speaking on my personal experience with being born into and being raised in Jehovah's Witnesses before I left at 15. Even though I still did actually attend certain things or even group outings with them off and on for a number of years afterward. I just want to preface this with, again, a very important note that I feel like is a no shit Sherlock type of statement, but then again, I've already had a handful of comments, especially on my, so this one, that is the one that we got a handful of comments on from very angry people, either that are Ex-JWs or are PIMO or are actually active Jehovah's Witnesses, even though technically that, by their own doctrinal definition, is committing apostasy on their part, while they complain about apparently people like me being an extreme slanderous apostate. So, you know. So I wanted to make the obvious point here, just for clarity, off the bat. Obviously, this is my own personal experience. If and when I bring in any other case example or cases, so examples, it's going to be because I know and have been able to verify that those are those people's also genuine experience, or the overall average experience is such a certain way, even if you personally yourself have never experienced that. It does not mean, even if you've been in for 50 plus years and so is your family and they've never experienced it, it does not make it somehow the commonplace or the most common form of Jehovah's Witness or interaction or treatment. That's a fact, whether you like it or not. So that point being made, let's jump into it. So, this is going to be a little either weird or unique depending on your perspective to start out this way, but it's kind of essential to do it so you can have the full picture kind of set for you, so you understand what kind of background that I came from. So, as I said, I was born and raised a Jehovah's Witness. I was born to a very devout family with a lot of extended family that are still actually very much devout JWs. And with that came a bit of a problem, which is that my dad, at least growing up, for all the years I had to be around him, he was by definition and all but diagnosed as a true full-on sociopath. And he was the very much narcissistic, authority figure, dictatorial type. Now you combine that with a fundamentalist mentality, you can probably already see where this is going, with his devoutness to Jehovah's Witnesses, and now you start to already get a pretty big basis for the full picture here. That just like doubled and amplified every problem I have with the religion, the cult, and with religion as a whole for me, because that's a lethal combo. Like, a lot of people would actually probably have offed themselves before they reached adulthood if they had to live through that. That noted, it was a very weird and unique set of circumstances, because the irony is that for the most part, the congregations that we went to did not see eye to eye with my dad in terms of interpretations, understandings, and that goes all the way through the doctrine, let alone scriptures or anything else. So as a result, that was always kind of a weird thing. And especially as a kid growing up in it, having that constant tug of war back and forth and that constant contradiction and everything really makes you a lot more irritable towards the topic in general already. And it's certainly, if you're a thinking type of person, like I have always been, you're immediately going to start to analyze the situation and start to analyze every single claim that's made and every single thing that is said, including every single interpretation, perspective, rule, doctrine, everything to the most minute detail. You're going to scrutinize it because there's no consistency. You're either going to lose your mind and go ape shit, or you're going to do what I did, which is pretty much that. And so it was bizarre. Especially considering, with that noted, the like I said, the congregations were not eye to eye with my dad, including the elders. So I actually had a abnormal experience when it came down to my experience with Jehovah's Witnesses. For the most part, there was some things that were very much typical, especially after I left. But for the most part, the people there, including elders, were still willing to talk to me. And I even was able to go with my dad to elders' houses and other people's. And actually, there was elders at the hall that I last had been attending and went to, that had years after I left, by the way, had attended, or not attended, but rather had taken me on a trip with them to go fishing, actually. So it was a full day trip, and they didn't have a problem with it at all. Like, they volunteered it, which I thought was really cool, especially considering there was not a peep about the religion or about criticism or judgment or anything cast. It was literally just having a good time salmon fishing. So, you know, obviously with that noted, like, that is not something that people tend to believe. Most of the time, if you're, whether you're JW or an ex-JW, you would adamantly say that person has to be a pathological liar to say that that is a thing, because of how incredibly strict and restrictive, therefore, the governing body, and thus the oversight committees and everything else, are towards elders who do not toe the line and do exactly as they are expected to and told and taught, which is, of course, to not associate under any circumstances in any way, shape, or form with apostates, or with, in other words, just simply people who left under their own volition or were disfellowshipped. Basically, in other words, oh, you're not a believer, you're excommunicated, which is literally what disfellowshipping is. It's understandable why people would be like, there's no way that's possible. But even the circuit overseer, the CO that we would consistently have every single year, was Molosky. I think that's how you say his last name. Molosky. I can't remember his first name. I'd actually be able to ask my mom about that. She remembers him so well, because he's been around for like 40 plus years as a CO, and like across the entire US. It's impossible just about to have been a JW or be a JW and not know that man's name as a CO. So like, everybody loved him. And I feel like it was understandable, because he was very different than you'd ever expect a circuit overseer to be. Because obviously they are like the ultimate elder, if you will, that they send around. Yeah, like he even had zero problems talking to me or my mom or any of my siblings, who all of us had been out for years by that point. And he had no problems being completely fine with spending time with us or talking to us, even if it wasn't about, you know, Jehovah's Witness stuff or religious stuff. He was totally fine with that. And so in a way, like, we were just, or I should say, really, especially I was, and my sister were especially lucky, because technically my brothers are half brothers. So they're both a decade older, a little over a decade older than I am. They had a very different experience than even we did. And plus, again, because technically they're the stepkids of my dad, you can probably imagine that that didn't go very well either. Especially when they started to, you know, do human things, including, especially as a boy, and you get into puberty, you're a teenager, you fall to temptation. And you could tell the projection went out something mad vicious towards my brother Mario, which we, in my family, we have a phrase which just says that Build killed Cookie. Because the nickname for my brother Mario is Cookie in the family, and then Mario Cookie came up a little bit later afterward, as he kind of softened back out as a crumbled cookie after being in his Kevin phase for a while, because it's his actual name. But yeah, and so we have that joke because it's technically a nod to what actually happened historically to him, and it was because, you know, boys will be boys. And he got curious, plain and simple. Like, he literally, you know, something very organic and natural transpired, and apparently that was the end of the world to my dad. So it was definitely projection, because you damn well know that's an admission of guilt when you react so viscerally like he did. Like, literally, it was as almost... He basically reacted and treated him as if he literally had murdered somebody. That was how severe he treated it. So, you know, to get the picture of how vastly different it was between my brothers and then me and my sister, it was very weird. Plus, they had obviously a lot more prior experience with a different congregation than Beaverton West. In fact, their main experiences were with Cooper Mountain. You know, me and my sister, it was dominantly Beaverton West and a little bit of Lake Oswego. For some bizarre reason, my dad decided he wanted to go out there for a little bit. So we did that for like 2 years, I think. And then we went back to Beaverton West because that's our local hall in the first place. So I don't know, it was weird. But the point is that, especially at Beaverton West, we had a very unique experience that is not usual for the average set of Jehovah's Witnesses to experience, especially when you are having concerns and when you are questioning, yes, the doctrine, you're questioning the scriptures, and you are growing clearly away from it because you don't like the nefariousness that it genuinely, blatantly contains to anybody who's honest with themselves. Like, if you're honest with yourself and you really audit it yourself, right? You really investigate it, you really dig in deep, and you really actually use your brain as it's meant to be used to think for yourself. You know, it's not satanic, despite what the doctrine tells you, and the governing body keeps fear-mongering you, as a JW was. So we were lucky in that sense, especially considering at Beaverton West, and I have referenced him before, there was the most, like, genuine, gentle teddy bear of a man at an incredibly empathetic and incredibly understanding and genuinely a great listener, and never, ever was judging anybody. And he was genuinely the definition of unconditional love. Like, he had great amounts of compassion and empathy for absolutely everybody, no matter if they, you know, disassociated, disfellowshipped themselves, or, like, you know, me and my sister just really questioned it and really had problems with the doctrine and with the interpretations and with the way that things were said and the way that things were dictated. It's like, you know, you have what most religious people will call a crisis of conscience, basically. And you have to make a decision at that point. And obviously, me, my mom, my sister, my brothers all made the decision to say, fuck this, we're out. Eventually, right? I feel like out of all of us, I did it by far the quickest. Because I did it at 15, but I actually probably would have done it earlier if I didn't genuinely fear, like, physical harm and other forms of torturous harm from my dad in retaliation for it, because he was such a control freak and he was so authoritative. It's like, you know, the whole devoutness to Jehovah's Witnesses, it was like a prerequisite. You were not allowed to do anything unless it was exactly as he dictated. And that meant you had to consistently go to meetings, and you had to keep studying, you had to do this, and you had to do that, and you couldn't see these people, and you couldn't be friends with those people, and blah, 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 blah. The irony is that my dad himself was a little weird with that. He was very hit and miss, because with my sister, who's, you know, the opposite of me socially, it was just really weird because he had that mentality, except she spent, like, almost all of my life growing up at her own friends' places. If she wasn't already at school, or then after school, literally working a job. And of course, every last one of her friends, her entire life, have been worldly. Some of them were actually devout, but to different religions. Other ones, they weren't religious at all. In fact, majority of them weren't. To be able to have been out and even been very well known, including to the elders themselves, and one of them who was a great friend of my dad's at that congregation, who became an elder there, actually. I fucking, after I left, I openly started questioning and criticizing certain things about the religion and the doctrine and the mandates and the rules and everything myself to their faces. I had no shame at that point. I had no reason not to do it. They still had no problem with me visiting their house and being in their house. And again, no talk of the religion, no talk of anything like that. So it was just, again, a contradictory experience, but it was good for me And I feel like it'd be better for everyone else to have, especially if you're a kid growing up and being born and raised in it, to experience that, because it is, I will admit, it's incredibly rare. It's so profoundly rare, especially not to be reprimanded by the governing body or the oversight committees, because they're technically not enforcing the doctrine fully, and they're not, you know, they're tiptoeing around things. They're not towing the line anymore. And that's a big no-no. You don't do that. But for some reason, they never fucked with the Beaverton West Hall, no matter how the elders dealt with people or things. I don't know why, but I'm thankful for it. But again, like I said, it's such a rarity that it's just, even I still sometimes think, what the fuck is going on here, you know, type of thing, because it's like, this doesn't compute, because this should not be possible. That noted, like I was trying to say earlier, there was this brother, Ralph Steadman. He was an elderly man, in his probably mid 80s, I guess really his early 80s through to his early 90s, when I was still in the Jehovah's Witnesses before I officially bailed at 15. He lived to, like, I think like 97 or something like that, or 96. But anyway, the most gentle, sweet man you'll ever meet. Genuinely the most compassionate person you might ever meet in your life too. Just a total teddy bear. And also just a giant child, a giant kid in all the best ways only. In an old man's body. Very ornery, conniving, a brat. Oh, everything about him was a delight. He was such a great person to be able to confide in. And so even some adults that have been in for 20 plus years would confide in him. But it was especially after each meeting, it was usually me and some of the other kids in the congregation would go up to him and they talk with him. But it was especially me and my sister specifically that were the ones who were doing it more in confidence, questioning the doctrine, questioning the rules, questioning the Bible and the scriptures, just pointing out the contradictions, pointing out the nefarious nature of some of these rules or doctrines or things. Even the Bible, there is nefarious things in that you're supposed to follow. And it's just like all these different things like that. And of course, way more than my sister, I was much more vocal about it, because I've always been a very vocally expressive person, despite being an introvert, because I mean, this is why I love doing commentary videos, right? And talks and stuff, because this is a great outlet for that hyper expressive nature that I have. So he made it a lot easier, and I think he also made me feel a lot more confident and safe to be able to take the shot in the dark and the chance, which was all but guaranteed that I would have been probably not just emotionally, well, not probably, guaranteed I would have been emotionally and mentally eviscerated by my dad relentlessly, but especially I was worried about the thing that wasn't very common for him, which is physical abuse. I genuinely believed that was a very high risk. I actually genuinely feared for my life to approach him and say, I don't believe in this, and I am just not, and I'm not just in Jehovah's Witnesses, I hate and I don't want anything to do with religion at all in its entirety, because I think it's all a bunch of BS. And everybody around me pretty much thought that that was a very scary prospect. So like people were, you know, my brothers, obviously my sister, my mom especially, were very concerned, because it's in his nature to retaliate, to be very vicious about that, because he's so controlling. And lo and behold, I told him, and he just literally on the spot accepted it. It was like, okay. And then he just, that was literally that. And he just dismissed himself. It was the weirdest experience, because it also was very backwards. It was the complete opposite of how he is with that stuff. So it really genuinely surprised me. But again, I'm thankful for that, because that could have gone the complete opposite direction and so much more dangerous and worse and harmful. So I'm glad that that happened, because that wasn't even a 50-50. That was like a literally probably at best a 1% chance that that was how it would go. And then, like I said, having the Ralph Steadmans in there, you know, a Ralph Steadman around, and having the elders not technically enforce a lot of the doctrinal rules, including shunning, obviously, so disfellowshipping or whatever, treating people like they are disfellowshipped or disassociated themselves, all that stuff. I will admit, again, and I've actually said this before, I will admit is not the correct way to say this at all, because I'm not admitting anything, obviously, but my brain is my brain, and it goes in the flow that it does. So whatever the correct term is, I don't know. But basically what I'm trying to say is I've said this before, and I'll say this again because I feel like it is kind of important, even though, again, this is one of my concerns with making this video and outputting it, is that I know that a lot of people will start to invalidate me, and they'll start to treat me and see me as like some sort of a weird fraud or grifter or something. Just completely invalid by default, because they're like, oh, you can't be Jehovah's Witness unless you're baptized. That's the official definition and criteria that the governing body has dictated. But if you are, especially and most specifically, if you are born and raised into the fucking religion and required your entire childhood to go to every single meeting, you're even forced to be dragged out into service, you are, door knock and harass people when they've told you to go the fuck away, and then still force the fucking pamphlets and the awake in the watchtower at the time into their fucking doorstop or their door jam. Ugh. And all that shit, read the daily text, go to the book studies when they had book studies, literally you were forced to do absolutely all of it because you were born into it. And there was no other way that your parent, in this case, the dictatorial one, my dad, the very patriarchal one, went and decided that this is what the scriptures say. This is what Jehovah wants, is that, children are at the bottom of the fucking pyramid of importance. And the most important thing is respecting the complete and total dictatorial authority, totalitarian, technically, authority of the man of the house, the breadwinner, the father, and the husband. That is at the very top of it. My point is that I was not ever baptized. Thank God. Even though I don't believe in him. But, figure of speech. Thank dog. But seriously, yeah, I'm very thankful for that. But I was never baptized. And I never will be, probably. But I still was a Jehovah's Witness. Yes, again, the governing body dictates, and the doctrine says that in order to be classified as an actual counted member of Jehovah's Witnesses, even back then in the 90s and 2000s, you had to be baptized. If you weren't, didn't matter if you attended absolutely everything and kept reading the Bible and kept doing the Bible studies and kept studying and were expected to answer questions as they encourage you to do because you're a growing child, you're getting older, you need to show your devout nature, which again also happened to me. The whole thing, the whole of the religion you had to attend to and you were a part of, whether by force or not, coercion or not. And you born and raised into that especially. Yeah, I'm sorry, you're wrong. You're 100% wrong to say you have to be baptized or else everything you say is invalid. You weren't a JW. Yes, I was absolutely a Jehovah's Witness. That's a fact. And therefore, that kind of brings me to my next point, that it is not correct to insist that just because an adult that starts consistently attending meetings and studying with elders and with other members of a congregation and going to Bible studies or hosting Bible studies or being hosted for Bible studies with them in particular in mind, going out in service, again, like I said, going to every single meeting and all the assemblies and all the conventions without hesitation because they want to be there. They do believe in it. All it takes is to be dedicated, to believe, and to consistently be a part of the technically indoctrination that is a cult, to be a part of the cult, to be a part of the religion like that. Fully involved, fully dedicated means by default you are of that religion. That is a fact. It's so obvious that that's the case as well because, again, especially if you're born and raised in it, because you are literally making the effort and or you are just simply being raised exclusively in this case, a very insular, shut down, closed off, fear-mongering heavy cult. Doomsday cult that is Jehovah's Witnesses. That's all you know, pretty much. And so you are going to be indoctrinated. Even if, no matter how resilient you are mentally and emotionally, you will have certain tendrils, certain roots take into your mind, your psyche, your being, and that's your life of the indoctrination. Inevitable. It is absolutely 100% inevitable that that's going to happen. It may be way less than everyone else. You may only have one or two tiny little pieces, fractions, that manage to slip themselves in there. But especially with therapy, you will absolutely find out that you were wrong if you thought they didn't succeed in it at all. I guarantee they did. Even if it's minor. Like me, it's like one or two things still have an impact on my choices. They still have an impact on how I feel. Or I should say, more than choices, how I react and how I feel. But it is choice-based technically too, because again, like there's certain things that just make me too uncomfortable that I just avoid them. I tried to face it. I tried to say, I want to try this. And then the anxiety and everything else goes through the roof because the discomfort skyrockets because of that little root, that little tendril that they got hooked into my fucking psyche, my mind, that I have to somehow pry out. And it's a bitch and a half to have to go through that process. The point is again, you know, if you're surrounded by only that, and that's all you ever hear, and that's the only people you're around, and that's all you're ever allowed to associate with, inevitably that's going to 100% permanently impact you and affect you and your life and your decisions and the way you see life and the world and everything else. You are therefore 100% by default a member of that religion, even if the religion themselves refuses to consider you an official part or member of them just because of random arbitrary criteria like you have to be baptized. Doesn't matter. You are in fact a member. And then, like I said, you know, I got the elders of West Beaverton later on than that actually took me to go on a fishing trip with them. It was just me and these two elders at the hall. I don't remember why I never remember this David's name, but because we have multiple elders that were named David. We also have multiple other members of our congregation that also had David as a name. I think there's like 5 different Davids on our congregation. For some reason, I can't for the life of me remember his last name. He was one of 2 elders. The other one was Mark Eichhoff, who took me on that salmon fishing trip, which was a lot of fun. I didn't end up hooking or catching any salmon. Of course I didn't. It was annoying. But it was still cool because Mark Eichhoff I helped him catch it, actually. I helped him fight it for a while. This 40-pound buck Chinook salmon. And it was fresh. It was not only fresh out of the ocean, because of course we're near the mouth, but it had a live sea lice still on it and everything. But it was at least 3 years old. Somewhere between 3 and 5 years old, but it was at least 3 years old. So it had stayed out in the ocean for like 3 years, at least. Potentially upwards of 5. That's like unheard of. So it was really cool. But it was the most deep, dark, brown, bronzy-ish brown colored salmon you'd ever did see. It was really cool. And it had one of the most long, gnarled freaking buck bills I've ever seen on a fish, too. It was a gorgeous, healthy fish, though. He smoked it, which I thought was a disastrous decision. You don't smoke perfectly tasty fillets or steaks. You just don't do that. You freeze the parts that you don't eat yet. That's what you do. And then you go and you put a bunch of lemon and some dill on him. Some salt and pepper. Oh, steelhead salmon that way are so good. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. Yeah, so that, again, these are elders that know that technically, by definition, because of questioning the doctrine or criticizing certain aspects of the religion, that by their definition, the governing body's definition, therefore, and the religion's definition of all time, throughout all of its time, it makes me an apostate. And they still volunteered to take me out on that trip. And they did. And nothing was said about any of that. They didn't judge me for it or anything. And we didn't talk about it, but we still had a great time. Again, you just wouldn't think that that could be possible. And so I have to acknowledge that and be super thankful for that. Because again, yes, to those that are unfamiliar with how this stuff works, this is by far one of the most rare, uncommon experiences that anybody would have as a ex-witness, let alone a witness or a disfellowship person or anything like that. This just is normally never allowed to happen. because they themselves would be harshly reprimanded for it, and they definitely lose their elder status, because like that is one of the most keystone, important, imperative doctrinal things to the governing body that you have to adhere to. This is why they obsessively keep doing talks about it and keep talking about it more and more, keep doing dramas about how you do not associate with these people at all. They are dangerous to your spirituality. They will poison your spirituality. They are basically the play toy of Satan and his demons, which is their favorite go-to, is everything is Satan and his demons if it isn't, again, within the religion and the confines of it. So yeah, because of that, again, I also get backlash for that anytime I've told that to people, because they're just like, they're auto dismissing it and saying you're a liar, because like it's literally impossible. They should have been themselves probably disfellowshipped, because that's one of the most egregious offenses you can have, especially especially as an elder. Like, the oversight committee would absolutely just give them a vicious royal thrashing relentlessly for that, and reprimands for such insolence. And so again, I have to acknowledge how lucky I am that that was my experience, because it's so incredibly rare, but like it gave me a lot more confidence and genuine happiness in my own heart to confidently leave and not have a problem with it. And again, I think it also proves a point that about me as well, is that just like them, but especially even more genuinely for myself, it didn't matter to me that they believed the bullshit that they believe. It really didn't. Like, I'm still going to treat everybody the same as I treat anyone else, which is with respect and kindness, and like you've known them for 5,000 years, you know? Like, that's how I treat even strangers. I treat them like, and talk to them like we've known each other forever, because I don't even, it's not even a thought. Like, I don't have any conscious thoughts at all, or even subconscious thought. It just is natural for me. It comes completely natural in my flow, because, you know, unlike a lot of people who are always entering judgmental mindsets where they're like, I gotta ask all these weird specific questions. Like, modern day, everybody's obsessed with fucking politics and socio-political positions, and it's like, that is one of the least important things you could ask somebody. Same with like, are you a believer? Okay, are you a religious person? Are you a Christian? Are you a Jew? Are you a Muslim? Are you a Jainist? Are you a Taoism? Are you a insert 1,000,005 other religions here? Are you a Old Norse believer? Yes, no, I'm not. But I'd like to pretend I was. the latter one, specifically, Old Norse. Nah, but are you a evil pagan? Still, it affects me very negatively to this day. It's really insulting to me that this was how they did it. And this was while we were with the Lake Oswego congregation, by the way, was the whole in-service incident, or incidents, I should say, where they were just very, very relentlessly harassing people and forceful with like, no, you will fucking listen to us preach to you and proselytize about our religion, the quote-unquote truth, and how you totally need to go to the memorial, and or you totally need to go, you know, depending on the time of year, or you need to go to this assembly, or you need to go to the convention, some big summer convention, regional conventions, you know, or whatever. We're going to talk about this, and that, and 5 other things. And literally to the extent that actually they would ask them outright, like, what do you believe? What is your religious affiliation, if you have one? And then they would do that because they're being judgmental. They were waiting for them to say whatever it was, so they could then criticize them and that religion and that belief, and for them for believing in that, and then trying to use that as their way, they're in basically to crack open the door, kick open the door, really force it open, to then force their own religious perspectives on those things about why those are wrong and ours is the real truth, the one true religion, down their throats. Because, you know, as the Bible, and very specifically Jesus always preached and said throughout the Bible, you know, you always want to use salt and vinegar and not milk and honey, because salt and vinegar apparently wins the most hearts and makes people really feel really good about themselves and really comfortable with, you know, wanting to hear what you have to say, the good word, you know. So make sure you bludgeon them and beat them black and blue, and don't let them have a choice in anything but forcing your fucking proselytization down their fucking throats, whether they want it or not. Long story longer. That's what it's all about, apparently, according to Jehovah's Witnesses and basically almost all other Christian sects. Actually, no, I hated that experience so much. To this day, I detest it. I resent it because it goes against everything that I believe in. It's everything that in terms of ethics and moral values, like it's so against everything that I stand for. It, is proselytizing and preaching and forcing shit down people's throats and then harassing them. And then when they tell you to go the fuck away and put them on your do not call list, or that they are on your do not call list because you said that you were going to put them on there the last 5 fucking times you showed up. And then they go and they slam the door in your face. You continue, and then you laugh, and you're like, oh, well. And then you go and you literally try to open their fucking doors again. And if you can't successfully do that, well, at the very least, you're going to try to shove your Watchtower Wake in your pamphlets directly into their door jamb. And they did that relentlessly. One of the most insulting experiences I've ever had. And I was forcefully dragged along with it because, I was a kid. I didn't have a choice or a right to say, I'm not doing this, without myself getting harshly reprimanded and punished by my dad for it, because you do not defy him, and you certainly do not defy the Jehovah's Witness doctrine. It's just disgusting. And that was, again, at the Lake Oswego congregation that this whole experience multiple times had happened, and I was so deeply uncomfortable and upset about it at the time, because I could not believe what I was experiencing because of how insulting it was to me then, and I was still a kid. I think it was like somewhere between 10 and like 12 or 13 at the time. Maybe a little younger, actually. Actually, it probably was. This probably was more like between 9 and 11 years of age. It was just like, what the fuck, dude? In fact, I'm pretty sure I actually vaguely remember criticizing it to them, and especially my dad, in the car on the way back to the hall after they completed their work. It's like, dude, what the hell's that about? Like that's not right. That's not okay. They told you no, and you still just do that anyway. What the fuck's wrong with you? Obviously I didn't talk like that, but you get the idea, the point of what I said. But yeah. And I know that I've heard endless stories about how that's always been commonplace, especially back in those days, across the US at least. Didn't matter your congregation, didn't matter your area, your city, your state. This is just like a common tactic apparently they had. And obviously you aren't winning anybody over if you're forcing your own religion and faith down their fucking throats when they already told you they don't want to fucking hear it. I don't even know if I could possibly salvage this and edit it into a proper video. I don't think it's gonna turn into an actual video. It's too much of a mess at this point. So I'm not even gonna give this an outro.